So in this video, we're going to be working on a real world scenario where we are going to create an AWS infrastructure and network for this company, TNL processing company. So we're going to be creating an AWS network for the company, storage, EC2 instances, and storage. So and create a storage solution with EBS. So begin. For example, the structure will have the structure will be like this. So we're creating the VPC, and then we'll divide the structure into four subnets. That's two private subnets and two public subnets. So it will be like this. So it's going to be like this. Then we have public subnet 1, private subnet 1, private subnet 2. Now this will be in one availability zone 1 and availability zone 2. So in this network, we'll create one EC2 instance here, an EC2 instance here, an EC2 instance here, and here. So we're creating four instance, especially in the private subnet. This one will store our back end files, and this one will store our database. So for this to be able to access the internet, we have only the public subnets can have direct access to the internet via a route table. This is the internet gateway. This is the internet gateway. This is an RT. Same with this site. Via a route table. Attached an internet gateway. So that's for the private subnets. They can only access internet via the NAT gateway. That is connected to the public subnet. That's the only way. The internet can't get direct access to the private subnet since it's storing confidential files. So the network will look like this, with our security groups and our rules. So to get started, we go to create our VPC. So after calculating your subnet, you have to use these various subnet addresses, and this is what we call the range of addresses and usable IPs. So you go back to your VPC, you already have this. So this is going to be a IP for the main IP, the main CIDR block. So you leave everything as default and you click on create VPC. Now your VPC has been created. The next thing we are going to creating is a subnet. So you go to subnet and you take create subnet. Now you have to choose the VPC in which you want to create the subnet in. Yeah, that's the VPC. So for subnet settings, this is the first subnet. So subnet 1, you say TNL public 1, showing that this is the first public subnet. You have to be very careful the availability zone. So for this one, we're going to take North Virginia US is availability zone 1A. This is the main CIDR block here, and you have to put the CIDR block of the subnet. You go back to your subnet calculator and you take the first subnet address, goes to the first subnet. You go to app subnet, and you do this for the rest of till you reach the fourth subnet. So this first two, this will be the second public subnet, the first private subnet, and the second public private subnet. So this and this will be US is 1A, US is 1B, US is 1A, US is 1B. So after all you have created there are 4 subnets for different availability zones. Discover that subnet 1 we have in availability zones, that's public subnet 1 we have United States, North Virginia, US East availability zone 1A, the subnet CIDR block. TNL public subnet 2, you have the availability is in 1B. You have to take note, why are we using different availability zones? So that if one availability zone fails, traffic can be directed to the healthy availability zone. That's we can use what we call load balancing. For example, if you use load balancing and if you create a load balance between the two availability zones, if this one fails, it directs traffic to the other availability zone if it's healthy. So this is our public 2 and it's in US is 1B. Now go down to private 1 is in 1A and private 2 is in 1B. So now you create your subnet. So I've created our subnet. So if you go back to your VPC and you select the VPC you created, that's TNL VPC, and click on the roadmap, you see our roadmap here. TNL VPC, this is our subnet, four subnets. The subnets in US is 1A, we have TNL private 1 and TNL public 1. In 1B we have TNL public 2 and TNL private 2. It's governed, it's attached to our default route tables. So we have to create our route tables for the private and the public subnet, so that they have one route table for private and one route table for public. So now we're going to create our route tables. So you come to route tables and you click on create route table. We're going to create the first route table will be our public route table. So TNL public RT. You select the VPC. That's very important, and you click create route table. So I've created a public. Now I'm going to create a private. You can see our public route table. Create a private route table. Select the VPC and create. Now you discover we have our 2 route tables, TNL public RT and TNL private RT. We have to attach now to the different subnets. So you click on the checkbox of the public route table, and you go to subnet association. You edit you edit explicit subnet association, edit subnet association, and it comes. Since this is a since we are on the public route table, you choose the public TNA public 1 and TNA public 2, and you say save association. So if we go back to our VPC and choose on resource map, we discover that we have while our private is not connected to any subnet, but our public NAT is connected to public 1 and public 2. So you go back to your route tables and you go to the private and you click on subnet association, you edit subnet association, you attach now to private 1 and private 2 and save association. If you go back to your VPC and you go to resource map, you discover that now our private is attached to private subnet 1 and private subnet 2, and the public is attached to public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. Then our default route table is it has been detached. So now the next thing we have to be creating now is the network associations. That's the gateways. You know that the public subnet can access internet directly to using the internet gateway, while the private subnet can only access internet using the NAT gateway. So I have to create the NAT gateway and the internet gateway. But we will start with the internet gateway for the public subnet. So here we are going to be creating our internet gateway. So go to internet gateways and click on create gateway. You write TNL and you create the gateway. Now you have to attach this gateway to a particular VPC. You attach to our VPC. Now after attaching to the VPC, if you go back to your VPC and you go back to the resource map, we now have our internet gateway in the connections, but it's not attached to the public subnet. So how do we attach to the public subnet? You have to go back to your route tables and you choose, since that's an internet gateway, it can be attached to, it's supposed to be attached to the public subnet, the public route table. So you go to route table and you click on route and you click on AD route. So you have to select now select this first IP address shows that anyone can access from the internet. And since the public subnet and always contain the EC2 instance that contains our front end, that's what we want the users to see. The private subnet always contains the back end and the databases that is private for the company and the users. So you select internet gateway and you choose the gateway that we created and you click save changes. So now if you go back to the VPC and you click on the resource map, you discover that we have our one connection that is connected. The internet gateway is now connected only to the public subnet. If you can see, public subnet 1 and public subnet 2, while private subnet 1 and 2 are not connected to anything. So we have to create a NAT gateway to be able to connect our private subnet to the internet. So you go down to NAT gateways. So go down to our NAT gateway and click on create. You have to choose the subnet. The private subnet accesses the internet using the NAT gateway, but through the public subnet. So you choose a public subnet for the NAT gateway. You can choose public subnet 1 and allow public, and you have to allocate an elastic IP address. So if you click allocate an elastic IP address, an elastic address will be created for you. But you have to remember that these things are very expensive. So after you finishing your network, if you are using for practice, you have to delete the resources. It will be charged by AWS. So you allocated an elastic IP address, and you leave everything as default, and you click on create NAT gateway. Our NAT gateway has been created. So after creating our NAT gateway, you have to attach it to the private subnet. So you go back to your route tables and you go to private and click the route and click edit. You have to add. So when you click add, you choose everywhere and you choose NAT gateway instead of internet gateway, since this is for the private subnet, and you choose the NAT gateway created and you save changes. Now if you go back to your VPC and you go back to our resource map, you discover that our network has been created. Now we have the internet gateway attached to the public and the NAT gateway to the private, as you can see. So looking at this, we have our full AWS network. Now for the next video, we'll be creating two EC2 instances in the private subnet where we will store our backend files and our databases. So if you like and you have any other question, you can please share, comment, and you can leave your worries on the comment section.